Hey, Mike.
Hey, Ethan.
Do you own any guns?
Maybe. Yes, I do. Legally, I own some guns.
Do you own any roses? It should have been the first episode song, but this is Welcome to Elfland instead of Welcome to the Jungle. I did my best to get it similar. You'll notice some similarities. It takes a while to get into this, so how are you doing?
Awesome.
Yeah, here we go.
Love it. This is a bit of my...
Welcome to Elfland. We got tons of elves, hobbits, fairies, leprechauns, honey. We got magic spells. This is the land where love transforms the beast. If you got the wonder, hey, we got your disease. It's Elfland. Welcome to Elfland, where tigers hang from trees. Oh, I wanna eat those magic bees. Oh.
You're listening to another episode of Chesterton's Gateway with Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. Did you know that in Elfland one might be shot with guns or roses?
Try it.
the doctrine of conditional joy. Oh,
You never know what might shoot you in Elfland. It could be a gun or a rose.
Apples, but not candlesticks and trees in Elfland. Welcome to Elfland.
Welcome to Elfland.
This is awesome. My nose, what's your reference nose?
After here.
The castle gonna fall down, 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 yeah.
This is good, man.
Yeah.
Definitely a top 5.
Oh, right, you're enjoying it, huh?
I like it.
This is the breakdown.
Welcome to
My Axl Rose Chesterton video.
A bear becomes a prince, and if you forget a certain word, a whole city might perish. We got castles made of glass, 50 centaurs singing crabs. You can have everything you want if you don't do the forbidden thing in Elfland.
All right.
Welcome to Elfland. Watch candles grow on trees.
All right, here we are.
In the castle of fairies.
Welcome to Elfland, everybody.
I love it. This is a worthy addition to our Elfland series.
Yes. So yeah, here
It
it is.
makes me want to jump into paragraph 3 or 4 actually already, but we'll restrain ourselves.
Restrain yourself.
Elfland, baby.
Have some ethics, man. We're an Elfland, sir.
That's right.
Where are your elfish ethics at?
Well, if they're elfish, wow. If they're elfish ethics, then they might be a little surprising.
No, you're gonna start
That's
going all
yes.
LOTR on me here.
Uh-huh.
Telling me all your knowledge of elf culture.
Oh no, I wasn't. No. I was just referring to the fact that it's one of those aspects of Elfland. It's that Chesterton talks about where you're well, anyway, we'll get into it. But
Okay.
but the way they work, the way elves work is both commonsensical and mysterious at the same time, and that's the cool part.
Now, is there any lead-in we should do here from last time, or do you think we're at a good?
Well, so I do think we should say one thing, just in case people didn't just listen to the last episode, which is that in our last episode, part 1 of Elfland, at the Ethics of Elfland, we Chesterton finished the paragraph that we stopped at by talking about his first principle that he's taking for this chapter, and that first principle is made of 2 parts. It is that all the best things, all the most important things in life should be done by the common man, not by elites, not by the good and the great, but by the normal everyday folks. The things that matter most to civilization,
Raising
the
kids,
mating of the sexes, as he says, the forming of laws, of common
voting,
laws.
yeah.
Yep.
Deciding
Exactly.
a person's fate in this jury, yeah.
jury, exactly. So all those things should be done by the common man. And he married that with another concept, which is that when he says the common man, he includes our ancestors. So he says it's not just the people living now, but it's the democracy of the dead, as we've said before. And it's the wisdom of tradition, which is the way the our ancestors and those who have passed give their vote today. They give it by leaving us the traditions that society's civilization has found good. And so we should respect those. So that's his first principle, is that we should respect common tradition. There's wisdom to be found in common tradition, and not in so if you contrast it, the last thing I'll say is, he doesn't say this exactly, but it's worth noting. If you take those two parts together, that we should be respecting the tradition given to us by the common man. What is that opposed to? That's opposed to the current teachings of the elite. So instead of going for whatever the newest, trendiest, elitist experts are saying, you should instead go back to what the common traditions of the ancestors that were passed on, what they said. So that's his first principle. And he says that there's going to be a few more, 3 more, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, he's going to say my first and last philosophy. So let's jump into that.
My first and last philosophy, that which I believe in with unbroken certainty, I learnt in the nursery. I generally learnt it from a nurse, that is, from the solemn and star-appointed priestess at once of democracy and tradition. The things I believed most then, the things I believe most now, are the things called fairy tales. They seem to me to be the entirely reasonable things. They are not fantasies. Compared with them, other things are fantastic. Compared with them, religion and rationalism are both abnormal, though religion is abnormally right and rationalism abnormally wrong. Fairyland is nothing but the sunny country of common sense. It is not earth that judges heaven, but heaven that judges earth. So for me at least, it was not earth that criticized Elfland, but Elfland that criticized the earth. I knew the magic beanstalk before I had tasted beans. I was sure of the man in the moon before I was certain of the moon. This was at one with all popular tradition. Modern minor poets are naturalists and talk about the bush or the brook. But the singers of the old epics and fables were supernaturalists and talked about the gods of brook and bush. That is what the moderns mean when they say that the ancients did not appreciate nature, because they said that nature was divine. Old nurses do not tell children about the grass, but about the fairies that dance on the grass. And the old Greeks could not see the trees for the dryads.
So if I may attempt.
Please.
One of the things he says is key in here. He says fairyland is the sunny country of common sense. And then he's saying that the old time, if you go back to the Greeks, and when they said, there's a god behind the sun's like a god, or the trees are like god, like miniature gods, or like these, we look back and scoff at that, but he's saying that's closer to true to me, because and he's going to get into it, but the life is full of these mysteries, and we've come up with ways to pretend like we have a grasp of all of it.
Exactly. Yes. So I think you hit the nail on the head there, because, and this is a hard concept. We're gonna unfold it over a number.
I heard this, I was like, is he crazy?
Yeah, exactly. and especially when we get into the third paragraph, there's a point at which with my, naturally I have a kind of a philosophic bent.
There's no man in the moon, right?
And I did, the first time I read this, I thought, you're just blowing steam, Chesterton. It's just, this is not right. And I had all these philosophical reasons. But then when I read it a second time and a third time, I realized that he's saying something very deep, actually. And you put your finger on it, which is to say that what he's going to talk about is that there are things that are rational and reasonable and logical. And fairy tales, fairy stories, they respect those things, those rational and logical things, just as much as science does. But there are other things, and he's going to talk about them later, that fairy stories do not respect, and modern science, or rationalism anyway, not real science, but rationalism pretends they understand more than they do. And so
Right.
what's fascinating to me here is that he points out that the origin of these common sense things were from fairy tales, and they were from his youth. So whether you had a nurse or a mother, it doesn't matter. I mean, everyone that has a nurse has a mother too, but whether you had clearly Chesterton had a nurse to take care of him, a governess or something like that. And so, but it doesn't matter. You were told these tales, you were read these tales from books in your earliest youth, and they fascinate children. And and they fascinate them, and largely speaking, they don't confuse children either. Children understand the messages, they understand the common sense behind it, and they don't have to think that there really is a giant, like a 200-foot human that lives up in the clouds. They understand the point, which Chesterton's going to go on about, and the ancients captured that in these kinds of stories, which are easy to the imagination.
Yeah, could not see the trees for the dryads. Man. They kind of, now we see the tree as a purely scientific thing. We understand it's organic material. It's growing around. We see nothing mystical
we
about
refuse
it.
to see the dryads now.
Yeah.
We refuse to see that which is mysterious in the world around us.
And we feel very smart being like, we know dryads don't exist, but what he's saying here, and I hope people grasp it, is it's actually really simple. That's the thing, is like, I don't know why it took me this long to wrap my head around it, but he's saying something very simple here, that there's still mystery in the trees. I mean, he's going to get into it, why are the leaves green rather than purple? Or just things like this. Like, there's an element of artisticness to the world that feels created for a reason, but that we don't know.
Yes, and for all of our science, we can
think
push
for all our science
vehicles to the moon or to Mars, but we can't explain exactly how he's going to get into this. A fruit comes about from a branch. Like, how does that happen? What's the necessity there? What's going on? And for all of our knowledge, we can't actually explain that down to its causes.
All right, we'll move on here.
But I deal here with what ethic and philosophy come from being fed on fairy tales. If I were describing them in detail, I could note many noble and healthy principles that arise from them. There is the chivalrous lesson of Jack the Giant Killer, that giants should be killed because they are gigantic. It is a manly mutiny against pride as such, for the rebel is older than all the kingdoms, and the Jacobin has more tradition than the Jacobite. There is the lesson of Cinderella, which is the same as that of the Magnificat, exaltavit humiles. There is the great lesson of Beauty and the Beast, that a thing must be loved before it is lovable. There is the terrible allegory of the Sleeping Beauty, which tells how the human creature was blessed with all birthday gifts, yet cursed with death, and how death also may perhaps be softened to a sleep. But I'm not concerned with any of the separate statutes of Elfland, but with the whole spirit of its law, which I learnt before I could speak, and shall retain when I cannot write. I am concerned with a certain way of looking at life, which was created in me by the fairy tales, but has since been meekly ratified by the mere facts.
Like
Magnificat.
A few good concepts here. First concept is Jack the Giant Killer, Jack and the Beanstalk, as we sometimes call it. It's actually a dual story between the two, but Jack in any version, any proper version of the story, ends up slaying the giant at the end, and the point that pride, which makes us large, arrogance, which makes us puffed up, deserves a penalty. That you deserve that things that are too big for their own good, or too big for their britches, as we might say in America, ought to be taken down to size. And so that lesson against humility.
Go back
Cinderella,
to episode one. It's all about that of our podcast.
Exactly. So the Magnificat is, of course, the prayer that Mary makes in Luke chapter 1, 146, I believe. And it is The Exaltavit Humiles is the end of a famous verse, so that Mary says, which is that the he has taken the mighty down from their thrones and has exalted the humble. She's speaking about God. So the exalting of the humble is the important, this principle that you're taught by Cinderella, that the humble should be exalted, and we have a love of that when we see it in Cinderella and we see it done well. We there's a consonance in our minds. There's a harmony. We say, yes, that's right. The humble should be exalted, and her ugly sisters should be taken down. And then of course the Beauty and the Beast, where the beast is loved and then becomes lovable, and by that Chesterton means that he's able to be loved back, able to love back and return the love. That's the truest form of someone or something that is lovable can love back. That's the final version of it. That's the final form of love. And Sleeping Beauty, with all of the things he mentioned in there. The Jacobin and the Jacobite. So a Jacobin they were the French revolutionaries that took down the king, and even though their efforts resulted in the French Revolution and the terror and all the abuses that followed, Chesterton's pointing out that they had more of the rebel in them than the English rebels, or rather Scottish rebels, called the Jacobites, who were all for Bonnie Prince Charlie in the 18th century. And the reason is because, even though, and this is interesting because Chesterton's playing against type here, he's sympathetic with the Catholic cause of the Jacobites, because they were exalting Bonnie Prince Charlie as the king, and but in doing so they were affirming the divine right of kings over the will of the people, so whereas the Jacobins in France were exalting the will of the people over the king, and so Chesterton's pointing out that to go back to his first principle, that he believes in common tradition as a true principle, that these are good things, to exalt the humble over the powerful, and to have that rebel spirit in your act. So anyway, that was a lot of details. I kind of found myself wishing that he says there, but I am not concerned with any of the separate statutes of Elfland, but with the whole spirit of its law. It makes me wish that he had been concerned, like he took, like, just take a week and do an essay on the actual, on the actual statutes of Elfland. Because right here, what does he give us? He gives us Jack and the Giant Killer. That's one, that lesson against pride. He gives us the exaltation of the humble. He gives us a love before receiving love in return. The curse of death, and that sometimes death can be softened. So he gives us 5 statutes, which are awesome, and I would love to hear more, but sadly.
Yeah, like straight out of the fairy tales, like the original ones.
Yeah, exactly.
I always like how I think it's Thumbelina and like all these like various ones with giants and stuff, where there's always like it's a bunch of them have this ending where the kid or Thumbelina or whatever, they hear the giants scheming that when they go to bed tonight they're going to eat them, and so they happen to hear it. So then that night they disguise the giant's own children as themselves and then sneak out. So the giant comes in to murder them and like slits the throat of their own child or some horrifying thing like that. Which, like,
the old
kid didn't have it coming, right? Like, he could just, if you could have snuck out, just sneak out. Like, why do you? But I think there is that lesson there of like that, evil begets evil kind of thing or something like that.
Right. And the sins of the father are visited on their children, and so the children don't deserve it. Maybe the giant's children don't deserve it. Maybe they do, but maybe they don't. But even if they don't, it's the sin of the giant that causes their suffering. But yeah, exactly. I kind of wish those old fairy tales, they go hard, man.
Yeah, I love them.
They're pretty awesome.
Okay, so we're on. It might be stated this way. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
It might be stated this way. There are certain sequences or developments, cases of one thing following another, which are in the true sense of the word reasonable. They are in the true sense of the word necessary. Such are mathematical and merely logical sequences. We in fairyland, who are the most reasonable of all creatures, admit that reason and that necessity. For instance, if the ugly sisters are older than Cinderella, it is, in an iron and awful sense, necessary that Cinderella is younger than the ugly sisters. There is no getting out of it. Haeckel may talk as much fatalism about that fact as he pleases. It really must be. If Jack is the son of a miller is the father of Jack. Cold reason decrees it from her awful throne, and we in fairyland submit. If the three brothers all ride horses, there are 6 animals and 18 legs involved. That is true rationalism, and fairyland is full of it. But as I put my head over the hedge of the elves and began to take notice of the natural world, I observed an extraordinary thing. I observed that learned men in spectacles were talking of the actual things that happen, dawn and death and so on, as if they were rational and inevitable. They talked as if the fact that trees bear fruit were just as necessary as the fact that 2 and 1 trees make 3. But it is not. There is an enormous difference by the test of fairyland, which is the test of the imagination. You cannot imagine 2 and 1 not making 3. But you can easily imagine trees not growing fruit. You can imagine them growing golden candlesticks or tigers hanging on by the tail.
Shout out to you and your intro music on that one. That was great.
Yeah, was it in the original? It's like knees. So the tiger's hanging from trees.
That was great. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I put a break there. That's not the end of the paragraph, but it's a long one.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, go ahead.
So this is a really important paragraph, and this is the one that I rebelled against when I first read this chapter, and then reread it, and finally, all of a sudden, the light bulb went on.
Triggered, Lib?
I was triggered in the right way, because what he's saying here, it sounded to me like what he was saying was, hey, look, in fairyland, there are some logical things, but not everything that you consider logical. To which I said, well, I guess I should say it's this paragraph and the next one taken in conjunction.
Yeah, this is
or maybe the fullness, still, yeah. the fullness of this paragraph. Yeah. But what he's saying is something, and let me just, instead of going through my whole mental grief that I went through, let me just say, give the punchline and say, he's saying something very, very simple and deep, which is that there are things that actually cannot be other than they are, or their causes cannot be other than they are by logic and pure reason. And therein there are other things that we imagine have causality, that one thing causes another, but which we're not quite sure about in truth, but we kind of pretend we're sure about for the sake of advancing more complicated conclusions. And Chesterton's going to really hone in on this point. And so in this part of the paragraph, he's talking about the things that are truly necessary. And what clicked in my brain when I reread it was, oh, he's doing what probably the greatest philosopher of all time, Aristotle, did in a book called The Categories, which I had read decades ago in my undergrad philosophy class. And in The Categories, Aristotle says he says the simplest things in the universe that you cannot reduce existence to anything except are these 10 categories of things. And all of them, by the way, pass the test that Chesterton says of the imagination here. So Chesterton references one of them as quantity. He says if you have 2 things and 1 thing together, you can't imagine that they aren't what we call 3 things. It's impossible. Right. You can't look at the 2 and the 1 together and say that it's anything other than the concept that we call 3, because 3 is nothing other than 2 and 1 together. That's literally what 3 is. or 3 ones if you prefer to break down 2. So he talks about I don't know if he says it in this paragraph, but the there's if a person is an uncle, I'll use my own examples. If a person, the ugly sisters, he says, if Cinderella is younger, if the ugly sisters are older than Cinderella, then Cinderella has to by necessity be younger than they are. This is one of the categories called relation in the 4 categories. If there's one of the categories is location or place. If I am in my house, you cannot imagine, if I say to you, I'm in my house, you cannot imagine a scenario taking those 2 concepts where the house is not around me. It's simply impossible for me to be in my house and the house not to be around me. And so
now, what if I was to take Haeckel's position on this? Haeckel? He threw that in there. Haeckel may talk as much fatalism about the fact as he pleases. It really must be. What's Haeckel's input on this?
Yeah. So, he's going to say this is a kind of broken philosopher of the 19th. I say broken, early 20th century, but 19th century, and he is absorbed with the idea of necessity. So this is like a materialist guy. It's like everything is, we're all just stuff bouncing around, so everything has to be the way it is. So so we're in this fatalistic universe. There's no real free will. It's just everything is, we're just stuff bouncing around, and if you knew all the angles that the stuff was bouncing around at and all the chemical reactions the stuff would create, then you would know the universe perfectly. But really it doesn't mean anything anyway, because all you don't actually know anything, because all you are is a bunch of mush bouncing around too. So it's this extreme fatal materialism. And
so he's saying this is the part Haeckel would agree with.
Yeah. Well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He made it sound like Haeckel would take issue with this part, but
yeah. Well, so what Chesterton is saying is there's a bit right with Haeckel, which is that there is a necessity there, but Chesterton's not going to be fatal about it. He's gonna take it to a level of wonder and mystery, as we'll see in the new paragraphs. But so there are these basics of philosophy that you cannot imagine one thing. If you say that one thing is in relation to another, if you say that one thing is in a certain place, then you cannot imagine that thing being in that place without the place being around that thing. If you say I am the father of 9 children, then you cannot separate the concept of children from me and have me still be a father. I can't somehow be a father of 9 children and not be a father of any one of them. So these are the basic necessities that Chesterton is going to say. These are actually truly reasonable, logical, and Elfland respects these things. Right. But it doesn't respect other things that we think of as necessary, which he's going to go on.
Right. He looks over, he sees the dudes in the spectacles, and they're all like, it's necessary that apples are red, or whatever the thing is. And he'll get
it's necessary that if an apple falls from a tree, it's going to hit Newton's nose. That's their, Newton's under the tree. It's going to hit his nose. Yep.
Let's just go there.
Let's do it.
These men in spectacles spoke much of a man named Newton, who was hit by an apple and who discovered a law, but they could not be got to see the distinction between a true law, a law of reason, and the mere fact of apples falling. If the apple hit Newton's nose hit the apple. That is a true necessity, because we cannot conceive the one occurring without the other. But we can quite well conceive the apple not falling on his nose. We can fancy it flying ardently through the air to hit some other nose, of which it had a more definite dislike. We have always in our fairy tales kept this sharp distinction between the science of mental relations, in which there really are laws, and the science of physical facts, in which there are no laws, but only weird repetitions. We believe in bodily miracles, but not in mental impossibilities. We believe that a beanstalk climbed up to heaven, but that does not at all confuse our convictions on the philosophical question of how many beans make 5.
Right. So I think
Yeah.
we've covered most of that. It just there's a separation between if you have Newton under an apple tree and an apple breaks away and falls directly above his nose. The scientists will say it's a law. It has to fall down in the way it does, and it's going to hit Newton's nose.
Yeah.
And the elf says it might, but what do you really know about how, why the apple's falling, and what direction, and what laws govern it, and whether there's true necessity or whether there might not be a random event that takes place where the apple falls towards Newton's nose and then does something else that you didn't expect. So you don't actually understand the concepts of the falling apple and Newton below it being hit are not of necessity philosophically. They can be caught, they can be seen in what he calls a weird repetition. They do tend to happen most of the time that way. But and you know what's interesting, and this is what clicked in my head when I was rereading it. Scientists even admit this. They come up with theories, and even their laws are theories. They'll say that.
Right.
Because they work by empiricism, and so they believe that we may sometimes, under some conditions, observe things that happened 1,000 times in a row the one way, and then all of a sudden, because something else was added to it, which we don't see the connection with, all of a sudden something different happens. And that especially is the case in quantum physics and quantum mechanics. And so especially because quantum mechanics gets into properties of being observed, things change when you watch them, and other such fascinating and mysterious factors. So Chesterton's being really careful here. He's saying, don't pretend you know more than you do when it comes to actual necessity and causality.
Right. And I think that that's the big difference between, like we talked about this in a previous episode about what faith is to a Christian. I think we have faith that we don't fully grasp everything, but there is this faith that we have that it's worth going towards it, choosing it, because we do have a faith that one day, maybe not even that it all makes sense, but we find a comfort in the mystery, God's riddles. And maybe one day he'll explain it, or he'll tell the story, or maybe there'll be, these things we do think that there's a possibility we have a mind that could grasp it someday, or at least we know that God's mind can grasp it. And I think that these guys, their faith is in their own brain, that they might not be getting it yet, but at some point it's all going to fit together like a big jigsaw puzzle.
Right. And often
there's no basis for them to believe that could be, like, why?
Exactly.
If it's all random,
don't know.
Why? Yeah.
They don't, well, especially if it's all random. But even for the ones that don't believe it's all random, that do believe in real causality,
right. I guess it's a big chain of events. Stuff,
they often claim to know more than they actually know.
Right. All right, we'll continue.
Here is the peculiar perfection of tone and truth in the nursery tales. The man of science says, cut the stalk and the apple will fall. But he says it calmly, as if the one idea really led up to the other. The witch in the fairy tale says, blow the horn and the ogre's castle will fall. But she does not say it as if it was something in which the effect obviously arose out of the cause. Doubtless she has given the advice to many champions, and has seen many castles fall. But she does not lose either her wonder or her reason. She does not muddle her head until it imagines a necessary mental connection between a horn and a falling tower. But the scientific men do muddle their heads until they imagine a necessary mental connection between an apple leaving the tree and an apple reaching the ground. They do really talk as if they had found not only a set of marvelous facts, but a truth connecting those facts. They do talk as if the connection of two strange things physically connected them philosophically. They feel that because one incomprehensible thing constantly follows another incomprehensible thing, the two together somehow make up a comprehensible thing. Two black riddles make a white answer.
Yeah. I feel like, we talk about this stuff. We kind of get ahead of the chapter sometimes, but he's kind of fleshing out what we've been saying, I think.
Yes, and there's the one thing I will add is just to say, in scientific studies, they even recognize this fact. They say correlation is not causation. So when you do a bunch of studies, just because you can say, oh, look, I have this group of people, and all these people over a period of 10 years, they all drank 6 cups of coffee a day, or 5 to 6 cups of coffee a day. And then at the end of it, like a small portion of them had more of a certain physical condition than the other, more acid reflux than people that didn't. Well, there might be a connection there, or there might be a lot of other factors that make it so that the reason that there's an 18% increase in acid reflux is not because of the coffee, but because of other things those people might be doing, that 1 in 7 of those people might be doing, or 1 in 8 of those people might be doing, to cause your statistic. So you don't actually have causation there. And Chesterton's just pointing out that this is at the height of this excitement about the scientific revolution that Chesterton is living in the early 1900s, and he's saying, look, calm down, just calm down, everybody. There's a deeper wisdom sometimes than your desire to think that you can connect everything causally and necessarily.
And the next part, he's going to bring up Grimm's Law. Can you maybe ahead of time, because I always get confused about this part, what he's talking about when he brings up Grimm's Law? You know what that is?
Well, yeah, I do think it's better that we maybe let's let him read it, and I'll
just let him read it, and then okay.
Yeah.
Just know that if you don't know what that is, you'll be confused like me.
In fairyland we avoid the word law, but in the land of science they are singularly fond of it. Thus they will call some interesting conjecture about how forgotten folks pronounced the alphabet, Grimm's Law. But Grimm's Law is far less intellectual than Grimm's fairy tales. The tales are, at any rate, certainly tales, while the law is not a law. A law implies that we know the nature of the generalization and enactment, not merely that we have noticed some of the effects. If there is a law that pickpockets shall go to prison, it implies that there is an imaginable mental connection between the idea of prison and the idea of picking pockets. And we know what the idea is. We can say why we take liberty from a man who takes liberties, but we cannot say why an egg can turn into a chicken any more than we can say why a bear could turn into a fairy prince. As ideas, the egg and the chicken are further off from each other than the bear and the prince, for no egg in itself suggests a chicken, whereas some princes do suggest bears.
And I did put a break right there, because it's another long one. I don't know if I lost you. So maybe I should keep going.
No,
you
didn't lose me. Apologize. Just had to make some comments to the people around me.
Oh.
So, yeah. So what he's talking about here is this is Grimm's laws. It's useful at Chesterton because you have Grimm's fairy tales in the same name. Grimm's law is this law. This law
it's
of
not connected to. It's not connected to Grimm's fairy tale in any way, right? It's a different Grimm.
Yeah, totally different.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know the name of the Grimm. What the name of the guy? So it's a linguistic law, and it guides. It's when you're looking at Old German, for example, and you got words that become Old English words that become Middle English words that become modern English. You look at the sounds, and so generally speaking, for example, the P in Old German becomes an F sound in English. So over time, for some reason, that hard P softens to a F, and the T softens to a Th, a TH. And so there's all these phonetic sounds that they follow. So Chesterton's just doing a play on words here to point out, they call it Grimm's Law. It turns out it's not actually a law because sometimes the words don't actually follow that change. So sometimes the P remains a P 400 years later from German to Old English. And so you're not, he's pointing out the Grimm's fairy tales are more of a law than Grimm's laws are. But we have this desire to like make everything a law. We to insert necessity where it is inappropriate sometimes. So.
Now, I'm just curious, is there an argument that science might have that maybe under a microscope an egg does suggest a chicken if they look at the DNA or something, or is that missing the point? Do they have like
I thought about that. It's a good question. And one of the things that science has done a really good job is take us down to the smallest level that we can analyze, down to DNA and down to the molecular level. And yet, at that DNA and molecular level, all they have is this strand of DNA with this combination tends to result in this kind of chicken or this coloration of chicken. They don't understand how this DNA and RNA interacts together. Why they understand? They're beginning to understand how it interacts together and when it replicates certain ways, but they are no closer to understanding why, for example, the double helix is the thing that is necessary to enable cell replication. The double helix strand of DNA. They don't have any idea why a certain combination, like why it actually results in blue eyes versus green eyes or versus brown eyes. They don't see the connection even at the lowest, deepest level, way beyond what the scientists in Chesterton's day had. They still don't see how blue eyes come from this combination, or why blue eyes come from this combination. It's still a mystery. Right. They can say it usually does when in this pattern, or sometimes almost always does, but even then there's no always, because there are always over a long period of time are mutations that occur, and they don't even know why that happens. So and they've gone all the way down to the molecular level. So there is no depth of materialist knowledge that answers the wonder of the creation of living things, for example, like
still, an egg in itself doesn't suggest a chicken. You might be able to use science to, now that you understand genetics, and to go, oh, this is a chicken egg by its structure at that level. But it's kind of like going,
right.
If there's some creature that poops out some kind of diamond, and that's where the baby comes out of, it's like deciphering the language that the story was written in, and you've gotten deeper in the mire of like what the details are, but you still don't know why. At the end of the day,
exactly,
this thing creates this shape, and this it's so
it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Like what would make sense is if chickens pooped out small tiny chickens that then grew into large chickens. Like that would make sense, like, because we know that, because you can see the connection between eating and growing. So there's at least some more sense there. But they don't. They make eggs, and the eggs somehow radically transform. Like, there's just everything about an egg is so different from what it is to be a chicken, down to its smoothness and coloration and everything. And a chicken just looks so different. And so we can say that it usually happens this way, but we don't actually understand what's going on.
All right, well, let's continue on here.
Granted, then, that certain transformations do happen, it is essential that we should regard them in the philosophic manner of fairy tales, not in the unphilosophic manner of science and the laws of nature. When we are asked why eggs turn to birds or fruits fall in autumn, we must answer exactly as the fairy godmother would answer if Cinderella asked her why mice turned to horses, or her clothes fell from her at 12 o'clock. We must answer that it is magic. It's not a law, for we do not understand its general formula. It's not a necessity, for though we can count on it happening practically, we have no right to say that it must always happen. It's no argument for unalterable law, as Huxley fancied, that we count on the ordinary course of things. We do not count on it, we bet on it. We risk the remote possibility of a miracle as we do that of a poisoned pancake or a world-destroying comet. We leave it out of account, not because it is a miracle and therefore an impossibility, but because it is a miracle and therefore an exception. All the terms used in the science books, law, necessity, order, tendency, and so on, are really unintellectual, because they assume an inner synthesis which we do not possess. The only words that ever satisfied me as describing nature are the terms used in the fairy books: charm, spell, enchantment. They express the arbitrariness of the fact and its mystery. A tree grows fruit because it is a magic tree. Water runs downhill because it is bewitched. The sun shines because it is bewitched.
The correct. Oh, we have a co-host that has joined us. Everybody say hi to Ollie.
Hey, Ollie.
My wife brought him in during the reading, and she said he didn't feel like it seemed like he was ready to go to bed yet. So
Nice.
my new pal.
How old is Ollie?
Well, when we found him, I think he had just probably been left by his mom, and I think he may have been attacked by something. But so yeah, he's pretty young. He's a pretty young possum. He's going to get bigger.
Yeah, they do get bigger. And what is he like? Is he just?
He's
chill
very,
right now?
very gentle and chill. Yeah, he's very chill,
Nice.
very sweet. So yeah, magic.
So now he's transitioned, and so his point rests. His preference for the word magic or charm or spell or enchantment rests on two principles. It rests on the first principle, which is that the words law, necessity, order, etc. These are words that presuppose a kind of, like you were saying earlier, a kind of fullness of understanding, that we see the necessity of the thing. And so we call it necessity, or we call it a law. We say this is the order of things.
Mm-hmm.
And he points out, no, actually it isn't. And there are exceptions, and we don't know why things work the way they work. So we don't have that full possession of all of the facts and the understanding that it would take to really use that kind of word. Secondarily, those words, law, this necessity, order, these things don't account for the sense of wonder, the sense of the magical, the sense of there is something just transfixing about eggs turning into birds, or the fall of fruit, and I would add the coloring of the leaves in autumn. This is something that has a magic to it, that talking about, the slow erosion of the xylem channel between the leaf and the branch that cuts it off, and then reduces the amount of chlorophyll, which changes the hue of the leaf, and then ultimately it falls. Like that kind of description, that scientific description of a leaf, why a leaf falls off in autumn, is lacking. First of all, it pretends to have a knowledge that it doesn't even understand, doesn't know why all those things happen anyway, not down at their root levels. And secondarily, it kills the wonder of the real in the world. And so this is why Chesterton prefers words that tend to have a mystery to them, like magic or charm or spell or enchantment. And frankly, I realized when I was reading this, I do too. I will hold out this case. I will say I think it's more realistic because it captures the sense of mystery in a way, like it at least it recognizes the sense of mystery that are in so many things in the world that are worth watching and worth observing and worth experiencing. That the cold scientism terminology doesn't do, and furthermore, like Chesterton says, the cold scientism pretends. It has an arrogance about it that it is not deserved.
Yeah, and I think it's that perspective. Yeah, the giant needing to be taken down. Humility, putting us in our right space. It's a perspective. It's from the right position. Even if science explains some of these things down the road, having that wonder about them, having that seeing the world from this perspective is so much of a healthier way of seeing the world than to have this arrogance about yourself and your
right. But we have to be careful, because he's going to explain in the next paragraph. This Chestertonian sense of mystery and wonder is not like Dungeons and Dragons spells and stuff.
Right.
It's not fantastic or mystical, as he says in his next line. It's more rational. Maybe we should read.
We'll continue.
I deny altogether that this is fantastic or even mystical. We may have some mysticism later on, but this fairy tale language about things is simply rational and agnostic. It is the only way I can express in words my clear and definite perception that one thing is quite distinct from another, that there is no logical connection between flying and laying eggs. It is the man who talks about a law that he has never seen who is the mystic. Nay, the ordinary scientific man is strictly a sentimentalist. He is a sentimentalist in this essential sense that he is soaked and swept away by mere associations. He has so often seen birds fly and lay eggs that he feels as if there must be some dreamy, tender connection between the two ideas, whereas there is none. A forlorn lover might be unable to dissociate the moon from lost love, so the materialist is unable to dissociate the moon from the tide. In both cases, there is no connection, except that one has seen them together. A sentimentalist might shed tears at the smell of apple blossom, because by a dark association of his own, it reminded him of his boyhood. So, the materialist professor, though he conceals his tears, is yet a sentimentalist, because by a dark association of his own, apple blossoms remind him of apples. But the cool rationalist from fairyland does not see why, in the abstract, the apple tree should not grow crimson tulips. It sometimes does in his country.
Nice.
I love how he flips it on them. They're the sentimental ones.
Exactly. And I remember when in college we were reading Newton and we were talking about gravity, and it hit me one day as I'm reading and we're discussing it. What are we even talking about here? Like we all use this term gravity like it makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. We talk about the law of gravity, and we speak of it in mathematical terms, like every piece of matter in the universe attracts every other matter in the square root of the inverse of the square of the distance between the two. And it's like, okay, what does that even mean? Like what how is this attraction happening? There's no stuff between me and the planet Jupiter. How is the planet Jupiter pulling on me? Across with no, there's no energy between us. There's no there's space, but there's no physical connections. There's no energy connections. It just does. It's a law. And I kind of flipped out in class one day. I said, why do we believe in gravity? What this is magic. This is not a thing that scientists can know anything about. We're just describing mathematically a magical force in the universe by which literally I'm pulling on Alpha Centauri and Alpha Centauri is pulling on me right now. And that's what scientists say. And they have no explanation whatsoever for it, but they call it a law. And they're very sober and calculating about it. And it's just at a certain point you got to go with Chesterton, I think, and just say, look, there's magic here, and we can appreciate that. And if we're being rational, we can call it a kind of enchantment, and we can say, look, there is enchantment in this world. We don't understand it. It's a part of our humility that we can admit that it's something mysterious.
It's true that if somebody actually could perform a magic trick and they performed it over and over and over again, you could measure it and write down all the measurements and then call it a law.
Yep. And you can describe all the ways that things interact. Exactly.
That's fascinating thing. And it would immediately it would suddenly become banal and uninteresting, or just another part of, the things that we take for granted, I guess.
It's that most evil of human superpowers, which is familiarity breeds contempt. And the more we see something, the less we are mystified by it, even if it still remains mysterious, like the sun itself, like how the sun continues on with its ball of fusion and fission that's happening, that creates all of the light in the world that allows life to exist. And we're so used to it, we don't see the sun god anymore. And that's why the Greeks were perhaps wiser than we to posit an Apollo or a Helios as a kind of actor within this magic of the burning sun. So anyway,
Right. All right. So for this
Last
time around,
paragraph?
this is our last paragraph.
all right, let's do it.
It's a little longer.
This elementary wonder, however, is not a mere fancy derived from the fairy tales. On the contrary, all the fire of the fairy tales is derived from this, just as we all like love tales because there is an instinct of sex. We all like astonishing tales because they touch the nerve of the ancient instinct of astonishment. This is proved by the fact that when we are very young children, we do not need fairy tales. We only need tales. Mere life is interesting enough. A child of 7 is excited by being told that Tommy opened a door and saw a dragon. But a child of 3 is excited by being told that Tommy opened a door. Boys like romantic tales, but babies like realistic tales, because they find them romantic. In fact, a baby is about the only person, I should think, to whom a modern realistic novel could be read without boring him. This proves that even nursery tales only echo an almost prenatal leap of interest and amazement. These tales say that apples were golden only to refresh the forgotten moment when we found that they were green. They make rivers run with wine only to make us remember for one wild moment that they run with water. I have said that this is wholly reasonable and even agnostic, and indeed on this point I am all for the higher agnosticism. Its better name is ignorance. We have all read in scientific books, and indeed in all romances, the story of the man who has forgotten his name. This man walks about the streets and can see and appreciate everything, only he cannot remember who he is. Well, every man is that man in the story. Every man has forgotten who he is. One may understand the cosmos, but never the ego. The self is more distant than any star. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God, but thou shalt not know thyself. We are all under the same mental calamity. We have all forgotten our names. We have all forgotten what we really are. All that we call common sense and rationality and practicality and positivism only means that for certain dead levels of our life we forget that we have forgotten. All that we call spirit and art and ecstasy only means that for one awful instant we remember that we forget.
I get a little swirled up there when he starts talking about forgetting who you are. I think I get it, but I also don't. I get a little lost when he starts going there. We forget to remember that we forgot who we were.
Yeah. So it's from that point in the paragraph, and indeed on this point, I am all for the higher agnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
Its better name is ignorance.
Man who forgot his name? Forgot his name? Yes.
Yes. And so he's pointing out that in our, I think this was what he's doing. He's pointing out that in our drive for understanding the things around us, we forget even the things that came before that we knew at one point, and so we've entered a kind of we cease to know ourselves, and there's a now I can't. Yeah, so he's going to go take this concept a little further, but this is a moment of sort of swirling transition. I
think we are like that. He is too. He's the man who's forgotten his name.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I flipped it around. I got confused and thinking that we've become this, and that's the bad thing. But it's like the man who's forgotten who he is sees everything in this new light. Sort of has this, with fresh pair of eyes, everything's. That makes sense. I don't know why it's so obvious. It's always like I over mystify things.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's just that you do yourself a disservice. This particular paragraph, his transition is rambly. It's not. It isn't very precise. So he's It's Anyway, we'll talk more about this idea of the ignorance and the forgetting and the rediscovering. He's gonna go into more.
Right. It's a big theme for Chesterton.
Yep. It's very platonic.
Alrighty. Well, next week we're going to be having a guest.
There we go.
Christopher Roulette. Yeah. I didn't know what to sound.
You are.
Okay.
You're in Elfland, baby.
Oh, I do that again. I get the song slider mixed up with the volume slider. So yeah, my buddy Christopher's going to be coming on next time. He's a big fan of this chapter. He runs the company Chesterton Stage Productions. He's going to explain the ending of The Man Who Is Thursday to us in probably a bonus video or something.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Welcome to Elfland. Watch tigers grow on trees.
I'm excited for my song for next week because we're going to be covering the doctrine of conditional joy next week. And so I got a song ready for that, and that's specifically what Christopher wanted to go on.
Are you going to give us a hint about the genre of the song?
It's not very exciting. It's more just the song itself is
Chesterton's Gateway is produced by Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. It is based on the book of the same name, which can be found on that capitalist monstrosity, Amazon.com.
Awesome.
Send questions and comments to chestertonsgateway@gmail.com. And join us on Patreon, where only the true Chestertonians can be found. Goodbye.
I think the ending almost. Oh, there it is. That was the
There
end.
we go.
All right. Until next
Bye-bye.
time.